A traveler's check is a pre-printed, fixed-amount check designed to allow the person signing it to make an unconditional payment to someone else as a result of having paid the issuer for that privilege. They were generally used by people on vacation instead of cash, as many businesses used to accept travelers' checks as currency. Merchants and other parties would accept them as if they were currency because, as long as the original signature and the signature made at the time the check is used is the same, the traveler's check issuer will unconditionally guarantee payment of the face amount even if the check is fraudulently issued, was stolen or lost. In short, a traveler's check can never bounce unless the issuer goes bankrupt and out of business. If a traveler's check were lost or stolen, it could be replaced by the issuing financial institution. Their use has been in decline since the 1990s as alternatives, such as credit cards, debit cards, and automated teller machines became more widely available and were easier and more convenient for travelers. Travelers' checks are no longer widely accepted and cannot easily be cashed, even at the banks that issue the checks. Terminology: legal terms for the parties to a traveler's check are the obligor or issuer, the organization that produces it; the agent, the bank or other place that sells it; the purchaser, the natural person who buys it; and the payee, the entity to whom the purchaser writes the check for goods and/or services. For purposes of clearance, the obligor is both maker and ray. History: travelers' checks were first issued on January 1, 1772 by the London Credit Exchange Company for use in 90 European cities, and in 1874, Thomas Cook was issuing circular notes that operated in the manner of travelers' checks. American Express was the first company to develop a large-scale travelers' check system in 1891, and is still the largest issuer of travelers' checks today by volume. American Express's introduction of travelers' checks is traditionally attributed to employee Marcellus Fleming Berry, after company president J.C. Fargo has problems in smaller European cities obtaining funds with a letter of credit. Between the 1950s and the 1990s, travelers' checks became one of the main ways that people took money on vacation for use in foreign countries without the risks associated with carrying large amounts of cash. Several brands of travelers' checks have been marketed. The most familiar of those were Thomas Cook Group, Bank of America and American Express. Declining use, the wider acceptance and better security of the alternatives such as credit and debit cards has meant a significant decline in the use of travelers' checks since the 1990s. In addition, the security issues for retailers accepting travelers' checks has meant that many businesses no longer accept them, making them less attractive to travelers. This has led to complaints about the difficulty that holders have in using them. In much of Europe and Asia, the checks are no longer widely accepted and cannot easily be cashed, even at the banks that issue the checks. Usage: purchasing checks for later use. Travelers' checks are sold by banks and financial specialists to customers for use at a later time. Upon obtaining custody of a purchased supply of travelers' checks, the purchaser should immediately write his or her signature once upon each check, usually on the check's upper portion. This helps protect them if they are stolen. The purchaser will also have received a receipt and some other documentation that should be kept in a safe place other than where he or she carries the checks. Travelers' checks can usually be replaced if lost or stolen. Cashing checks: when wanting to cash a traveler's check while making a purchase, the purchaser should, in the presence of the payee, date and countersign the check in the indicated space, usually on the check's lower portion. Denomination and change: applicable change for a purchase transaction should be given in local currency as if the check were bank notes. Travelers' checks are available in several currencies such as US dollars, Canadian dollars, pound sterling, Japanese yen, Chinese yuan and euro. Denominations usually being 20, 50, or 100 of whatever currency, and are usually sold in pads of 5 or 10 checks, for example, 5xa20 for a 100. Travelers' checks do not expire, so unused checks can be kept by the purchaser to spend at any time in the future. The purchaser of a supply of travelers' checks effectively gives an interest-free loan to the issuer, which is why it is common for banks to sell them commission-free to their customers. The commission, where it is charged, is usually 1 to 2% of the total face value sold. deposit and settlement, a payee receiving a traveler's check should follow its normal procedures for depositing checks into its bank account, usually, endorsement by stamp or signature and listing of the check and its amount on the deposit slip. The bank account will be credited with the amount of the check as with any other negotiable items submitted for clearance. In the United States, if the payee is equipped to process checks electronically at point of sale, he or she should still take custody of the check and submit it to a financial institution, particularly to avoid any confusion on the part of the purchaser. Security issues. One of the main advantages travelers' checks provide is the replacement if lost or stolen. However, this feature has also created a black market where fraudsters buy travelers' checks, sell them at 50% of their value to other people and falsely report their travelers' check stolen with the company from which the check was obtained. As such, they get back the value of the traveler's check and make 50% of the value as profit. The widespread problem of counterfeit travelers' checks has caused a number of businesses to no longer accept them or to impose stringent checks when they are used. It is a reasonable security procedure for the payee to ask to inspect the purchaser's picture ID. A driver's license or passport should suffice, and doing so would most usefully be towards the end of comparing the purchaser's signature on the ID with those on the check. The best first step, however, that can be taken by any payee who has concerns about the validity of any traveler's check, is to contact the issuer directly. A negative finding by a third-party check verification service based on an ID check may merely indicate that the service has no record about the purchaser, or at worst that he or she has been deemed incompetent to manage a personal checking account. Some purchasers have found the process of filing a claim for lost or stolen checks is cumbersome, and have been left without recourse after their checks were lost or stolen. Alternatives. The widespread acceptance of credit cards and debit cards around the world starting in the 1980s and 1990s significantly replaced the use of travelers' checks for paying for things on vacation. In 2005, American Express released the American Express Traveler's Check Card, a stored value card that serves the same purposes as a traveler's check, but can be used in stores like a credit card. It discontinued the card in October 2007. A number of other financial companies went on to issue stored value or prepaid debit cards containing several currencies that could be used like credit or debit cards at shops and at ATMs, mimicking the traveler's check in electronic form. One of the major examples is the Visa Travel Money Card. See also, cashier's check, certified check, Eurocheck, money order, references. External links, American Express Travelers Checks Merchant Site, Visa Travelers Checks, Visa Interpayment Travelers Checks, Thomas Cook MasterCard Travelers Checks, Travelex Travelers Checks.